Ice Creations Radio. This is Henrik Palmgren. Good to have you with us, and thank you for tuning in. We are recording this program from Sweden in Scandinavia, but wherever you are around the world, you can find us online at our website, redicecreations.com, REDICE creations.com. Good to have you here. Hope you're settled in for another program. Today we have Jerry E. Smith back with us on the show. We've had Jerry with us before, so if you remember, he is the author of Secrets of the Holy Lands, or Secret of the Holy Lands, HAARP, the Ultimate Weapon of the Conspiracy, and Weather Warfare. And today I thought we could discuss a little bit about both of his book, HAARP and Weather Warfare, and a little bit about how this actually ties into the global conspiracy, if you will, and the emerging scenario of the world of government control, etc., etc. So it's going to be very interesting hearing more about Jerry regarding these matters. Jerry's website, by the way, is jerryesmith.com. jerryesmith.com, where you can find a lot more information about his books and his research. So it's a pleasure having you back on the program, Jerry. Thank you for coming on.
Well, hi. Good to be with you again.
Excellent. I do want to ask you a little bit about, I don't know if that's a good place to start or not, but I want to ask you a little bit about Jim Keith. As I understand it, you were a close associate and friend to him, and I also wanted to tie this in, I guess, a little bit about his research and of course, your own research, and maybe how the two dovetails, and also a little bit background on Jim Keith and potentially what could have happened to him, so to speak. What do you think, Jerry?
Sure. Jim Keith was my best friend from 1966. We met in high school up until his untimely death in 1999. He died a few days before his 50th birthday. Jim and I worked together off and on throughout that whole 30-year period. We in the 60s, we did a number of amateur publications together, some of which received rather high critical acclaim in the science fiction fantasy community. We both wanted to grow up to become science fiction authors, and sometime in the 80s we discovered that we had a talent for nonfiction, and Jim produced a dozen books of nonfiction, and I helped write about a third of them in one way or another. We were working on we'd done a number of semi-professional publications in the 70s and 80s, shopper newspapers and small circulation magazines. And one of the small circulation magazines was Dharma Combat, the magazine of spirituality, reality, and other conspiracies. And for Dharma Combat, we were getting in a lot of really great material that Jim didn't want to waste on a small circulation zine. So he wanted to go to a paperback quarterly, a magazine in paperback format that would come out 4 times a year. And he pitched this to a number of editors, and Adam Parfrey at Farrell House was interested, but he didn't want to do it as a quarterly, didn't want to do it as a periodical. He wanted to do it as a one-shot book. And that book came out eventually as Secret and Suppressed, Hidden History, and Banned Ideas. And that's kind of a funny story. Jim wrote an introduction to the book, and he hated the introduction. I thought it was perfectly fine, but he hated it. And as he was coming up to the last couple of days before he had to submit the final manuscript to Adam, he just threw it at me and said, "Here, you write it." So I took what he wrote, and I was working on a book that has yet to come out called Toppling the Pyramid, A Practical Guide to Overthrowing the New World Order. So I took about half of his intro and half of what never appeared in that book and cobbled them together to make the introduction to Secret and Suppressed under Jim's pen name, which Adam Parfrey was livid when he discovered that had happened a few years later. Another oddity is that at the same time, in Dharma Combat, we had published a thing called the Skeleton Key to the Gemstone File.
Mm-hmm.
And the Skeleton Key to the Gemstone File had been circulating samizdat, as an underground secret publication in which people were Xeroxing it and handing each other and going to each other, wow, this is incredible stuff. The Skeleton Key purports to be, there was a guy named Bruce Roberts who said that he invented the technology for making artificial rubies. And he took the technology to Howard Hughes, and Hughes' company stole the technology, which really upset Bruce Roberts, and Bruce Roberts decided to get something on Hughes. So over the next several years, Bruce Roberts made his artificial rubies and then sold them as being real ones to raise cash to investigate Hughes.
Okay.
At one point, he had what became known as the Gemstone File, and this was about 1,000 letters that he'd written mostly to his mom and had kept copies of. And there was, you may have heard of Mae Brussel, M-A-E Brussel.
No, I'm
Mae
not.
was the queen of conspiracy. She did a conspiracy show called Conspiracy Corner from a little radio station in Monterey, Carmel, California, for about 20 years. And indeed, she died of a fast-acting cancer identical to the one that Jack Ruby died of, and was convinced, like Jack Ruby, that she had been given it to take her out. And her primary area of research was connections between the JFK hit and the Nazis.
Really?
At one point, Bruce Roberts shows up at her home with a car filled with cardboard boxes filled with the 1,000 letters that he'd written his mom of his research into what Howard Hughes was all about.
Mm-hmm.
And when he showed up, it just happened that there was a person named Stephanie Caruana who was a reporter for Play Girl magazine. And Stephanie offered to take the files, put them in order, and write a synopsis. And that synopsis became known as the Skeleton Key to the Gemstone File. And in the Skeleton Key, it purports, Bruce Roberts was convinced that he'd discovered the truth about the JFK hit, which is why he brought it to Mae Brussel, and that he believed that Aristotle Onassis had actioned the assassination. He also believed that Aristotle Onassis had kidnapped Howard Hughes, kept him at his secret island Scorpios, and murdered him, and dumped the body in a secret funeral. When we published a copy of the Skeleton Key to the Gemstone File in Dharma Combat, we got contacted by this guy from Atlanta, Georgia, named Ron Bonds. And Ron had been collecting every known version of the Skeleton Key. Ron and Jim agreed to start a publishing company. Ron would be the editor-publisher, and the first book out of the gate would be an analysis of the Gemstone File. And this was Jim's second book, the Gemstone File, which was edited by Jim, and it was a collection of articles by a number of people, including Stephanie Caruana, of what this thing was, what it purported, whether it was true or not. And by the luck of the draw, the publishing industry is very slow, and it took Feral House, Adam Parfrey, about a year and a half to get Secret and Suppressed out. Meanwhile, Ron Bonds, not knowing how slow it's supposed to go in publishing, he whips out the Gemstone File. So Jim's second book actually is his first book, and his first book is actually his second book.
Right. Oh my God! So was this the initial cooperation then that you guys began after you were writing the introduction here? Did this kind of set you off both to work more closely together?
Well, actually, we had been working very closely together. We had formed sort of a fiction factory, and we had written together. I lost track. We wrote under a variety of pen names. The pen name I liked the most was Michael Drax. Jim Keith was a huge fan of Lord Dunsany. Lord Dunsany wrote 180 fantasy novels, all with a quill pen. And this was after the invention of the typewriter, but he was a technophobe and hated typewriters, so he wrote 180 fantasy novels with a quill pen, which I thought was rather hilarious. And Lord Dunsany had a bunch of middle names, I don't know, 6, 8, 10, you know how British lords are.
Right.
And two of his middle names were Michael and Drax, so that was one of our pen names. And I think Jim sold 8 or 10 books under that title, or under that byline, in which Jim and I, we worked out a deal where I did continuity, and he did. Jim was really good at dialogue and internal dialogue, of what people are thinking and feeling. He was really good at that. But in terms of the physical world, it was just hilarious. He didn't have any interest in it. So a girl would walk into a room in a red dress, engage, have a big argument scene with the people in the room, and then walk out of the room wearing a green dress. I mean, walk in red, walk out green, because Jim just didn't pay any attention.
Right.
So I would do the continuity on Jim's stories, and there were things like in one story he needed a really fancy mansion, so I designed the mansion and wrote up all the scenes for each of the rooms, and then he just plugged my descriptions in as he went through the case of the story.
Right.
Right, so we were doing fairly good at that, but most of these were what are called works for hire, which is you get a flat payment and no royalties. You just get a one-time payment and it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the reasons why I lost track of how many of these I'd worked on, because I had worked on pieces of books and got no royalties from them, so it wasn't really worth the bother of keeping track of them. So I really don't know how many books in total I have helped to write. 40, 50, something like that. So Jim and I were working on this fiction factory and doing Dharma Combat, and we set up the National UFO Museum in Reno, Nevada, in which I played the executive director and he played the chairman of the board, which meant basically he did nothing except harass me occasionally.
Right.
And I was the editor-in-chief of the Quarterly Journal, which came out about semi-annual instead of quarterly. We got out 3 or 4 issues before Reaganomics and the last big U.S. recession took us out. Well, all of which led to our getting a lot of really good nonfiction material and a lot of good nonfiction writing under our belts.
Right.
And then when Jim got connected up with Ron Bonds, he cranked out several books for Ron, including the runaway bestseller Black Helicopters Over America, Strike Force for the New World Order.
Right.
And the sequel to it, Black Helicopters Over America, The Endgame Strategy. And Jim and I became very, I won't say active in, but very much aware of and surrounded by the militia movement, the extreme American right wing.
Right.
They seem to be the people. We're getting all this conspiracy theory stuff, and the left wing of America was saying that the right wing was the conspiracy, and the right wing was saying the left wing were the conspiracy. It was hilarious.
Right.
And both sides were this is the thing that I find amazing, is that if you listen closely, both sides are saying exactly the same thing.
Of course.
They're saying that there are fascists running our country who are stealing our rights from us.
Yeah.
And each side accuses the other side of being responsible for the fascists who are stealing our rights.
Exactly. Oh my God, it's a circus. That's what it is. Incredible.
So we the way I got my first nonfiction book. The first one still has to be published. Jim got an invitation from Lumpanics, who have since folded. Lumpanics was both a mail order catalog and a publishing house, much like my publishing house that I'm working for now, Adventures Unlimited Press. And Lumpanics was owned by Mike Loy, and Loy had this bright idea of doing a book called Strategies for Overthrow, which would be a collection of articles on how to legally overthrow the U.S. government. And Jim got this invitation